On this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, Morant is absent from the Team USA player pool for the Paris Olympics. Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. are not, however. I have some hot takes on all three that I'm excited to share with you. I'm sure Damichael will have to cool me down a little bit. Plus, we're going to talk Memphis Grizzlies-Miami Heat. You may or may not have heard that there was a trade involving the Miami Heat that just went down, a scary trade to say the least. We'll talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Lock in with us.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a wild Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It might be a hot take edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I tell you what, I'm feeling spicy. Maybe it's the YouTube comments. Maybe it's just the fact that we're midway through the week. Whatever the case might be, I'm feeling it, Damichael Cole. I don't know about you, but it could just be that I'm so excited to be back with you, as I always am, when we have a chance to get the dynamic duo together. A fun edition of Locked On Grizzlies is coming your way next. You made a good decision to stop by on this very special Wednesday program. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I've been covering the Grizzlies in one way or another for over a decade now. Between the two of us, you've come to the right place, not just for Memphis Grizzlies content, but NBA content. And if you ever wanted to get mad online, let me tell you something. Follow me on X. Listen to me talk for 5 minutes. There's going to be something that you want to fight me over. And it's going to be fun, right? We're going to have a good time. Damichael cools me down. I heat things up. It's a spicy episode of Locked On Grizzlies. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all those fun things. Check us out on YouTube as well. I don't know if you've had a chance to look, Damichael, but we are getting closer and closer to 3,000. I think we're roughly 40 or so away. That number keeps creeping up steadily. Thank you to everybody. We got to
get there before the end of the month.
Yeah, that's my hope. Yeah, by January 31st. I think I said by the end of the week earlier this week. But, by the end of the month at the latest. I think we could do better than the end of the month. I think by the end of the week, it's Wednesday. We have time, but you got to spread the word. You got to tell your friends, subscribe to Locked On Grizzlies, help Damichael and Joe out. They're doing a good job. At least I think we're doing a good job. A little bat pack every once in a while doesn't hurt. Damichael, bat pack to you, sir. A wonderful solo episode. I loved hearing you talk about the Grizzlies win. It's always more fun after wins. The Grizzlies picked up a win off the court on Tuesday. Mildly surprising one, maybe, if you don't pay too much attention to international basketball. The Team USA player pool, the group of guys that they're going to be making their choice for the 12-man roster for the Paris Olympics, was announced. And if you've been paying attention to Locked On Grizzlies, you're not surprised that Jaren Jackson Jr. was on the list because he played in the FIBA tournament, right? So it's almost like a foregone conclusion. He at least was going to be in this initial player pool because he's already in the system. Maybe a little bit more of a mild surprise is the fact that Desmond Bane is in this player pool. So of 41 Team USA eligible players, that includes LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Joel Embiid, all guys that are locks for this team.
Superstars. I mean, this player pool is loaded.
It's loaded. You've got Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane in the mix. Here's how the show is going to work today. Damichael is going to kind of take the charge towards the end of the show. He has some Scary Terry Rozier takes that he's going to share. He's excited about Scary Terry. I am excited to unload this hot take on all of you. Here we go.
Right off the top.
Desmond Bane is a 100% lock to make Team USA. At least he should be a 100% lock to make Team USA. Here's why. There is no one in that player pool. And I do mean no one. I am very aware of the words that I am choosing right now, and I am being very specific in how I say them to Michael Cole. There is nobody in that player pool that personifies international style basketball on the perimeter better than Desmond Bane. Better than Desmond Bane. He has peers, don't get me wrong. Some of you are saying Steph Curry's on. Yeah, I'd say at this point they're in the same realm. But if you watch Desmond Bane play basketball on a regular basis, like you and I do to Michael Cole,
Yeah.
Here's a guy who can shoot an elite percentage from the three, who can create downhill, score at all three levels, defend at a high level compared to the older jabronis that we were just talking about. This is somebody whose game is tailor-made for international play. In a similar way to Jaren Jackson Jr.'s, at least in terms of rim protection, getting blocks, Desmond Bane offensively, as a creator of offense for others, as a creator of offense for himself, and as a plus defender, he may not be a lock to be a starter on Team USA, but that's my hottest take to Michael Cole. Desmond Bane should be a 100% lock to make this roster. And I know that it's a loaded list, and I know there's a lot of good options for Team USA. Desmond Bane is one of the best options. This is where I hold up my cup of coffee or whatever and say, prove me wrong.
Joe, I don't want to prove you wrong on this, but let's dive into it real quick, right? Let's get into the Desmond Bane part of this that you just addressed. But I want to point out this number as well. There are 41 players on the player pool, right? 28 of them have experience in USA basketball competition previously. Desmond Bane is not one of those 28 players.
Austin Reeves is, though. Austin Reeves? Wouldn't he count as one of those 28?
He would count. But that is the
you take him out of the running right away.
First of all, he's not making the Olympic team. Anyways, Austin Reeves. Okay, so let's get into it. Here's the thing. We got to list some of these names. Anthony Edwards. Paul George. Devin Booker. Like we're talking about the guards. Anthony Edwards, Paul George, Devin Booker, Stephen Curry, Dame Lillard, Trae Young. With all, you know how I feel about Desmond Bane. I don't even have to get into that. But I think, here's the thing. All of those guys, when you just talk about talent and transferring it over to Team USA, I think all those guys are ahead of Desmond Bane in the quote-unquote pecking order at this time. But here's where I don't disagree with you. I won't say 100%, but I'll say there's a very good chance that Desmond Bane is on the team simply because we know how this process plays out. Every time the Olympic player pool comes out, if you're familiar with this in the past, we get excited. Oh, you see LeBron James on there. You see Kawhi Leonard's name on the list. You see Jason Tatum. You see Devin Booker. You see Kevin Durant is on the list. All these great point guards, Tyrese Halliburton. And then what happens is Kawhi Leonard goes on a long playoff run, or Kevin Durant goes on a long playoff run, or such player picks up an injury towards the end of the regular season that they played through, and then they get it addressed, in the offseason. And then they take themselves out of the running for the Olympic play. The point is that in the age of load management and things like that, we're seeing more players use that time in the offseason to recover. That's why the last Olympic team, if you remember, it was Kevin Durant pretty much carrying that squad. There was no LeBron James and whatnot, but it was Kevin Durant carrying that squad. I think you had Jason Tatum, you had Devin Booker, and Drew Holiday. But you also had guys like, this was Derek White before he is what he is now, on that team. Like Derek White, with all due respect to him then playing on the Spurs, he wasn't an Olympic, typical Team USA type of player at that time. So the point is, from what I know about Desmond Bane, me and him talked last summer in Vegas about this. He's very interested in playing for Team USA. Last year, Grant Hill was in constant communication with Desmond Bane like he was with Jaren Jackson Jr. And Desmond Bane would have been on Team USA's FIBA World Cup team had it not been for that toe injury. Remember, he had to get the offseason procedure.
I do remember
If it wasn't for that, Desmond Bane would have been on Team USA FIBA World Cup team. So I'm pointing out the fact that Desmond Bane is a hooper. He wants to play basketball. And if he's healthy, being that after this, he recovers from his injury, comes back at the end of the season, plays basketball, and doesn't play in the playoffs, I think I agree with you from the standpoint there's a strong chance that Desmond Bane is on the Olympic team. But if Paul George says, I want to do it, if Anthony Edwards says, I want to do it, and if Devin Booker says, I want to do it, that's your 3-2 guards, in my opinion, right there.
Paul George isn't a 2 guard.
On Team USA, he would be.
Paul George is like 6'10". He's not playing the 2 on this team.
So look at
the Clippers right now. An all-star team. It's not just an all-star team. They look for good fits in terms of winning basketball. It's not like it's the dream team where they're trying to pick the top 12 dudes on the planet.
Those guys are good spot-up shooters.
Game is more conducive. And like Trae Young, you brought up Trae Young. I would happily make a friendly wager with you off air, because we're not going to gamble on air, that Desmond Bane has a better chance and would make Team USA in front of Trae Young. Because as offensively explosive as Trae Young might be, he's a defensive liability.
But what is Team USA's primary weakness every year? It's playmaking. Playmaking is the one area where Team USA has historically, because they play a lot of individual isolation basketball. When you see them go against Serbia, when you see them go against the Argentina or the Spains of the world, these teams that move constantly off the basketball, it's always those Jason Kidds, Chris Pauls, Tyrese Halliburton on this FIBA World Cup team. We just saw it.
Notice I didn't say Halliburton. I think Halliburton will be on this team.
Yeah, for sure. So my point is, I agree. Desmond Bane's style of play, like, I'm with you. The three-point shooting, Team USA needs it. The playmaking, the way he pushes the ball in transition. But what makes Team USA stand out from other countries is elite athletes. And so you're telling me if you can put a lineup on the floor that has LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Paul George, Anthony Edwards, those type of athletes, guys that are, known as two-way dominant players in the NBA, I would favor them. But at the same time, here's where I agree with you. I think I'm not confident in saying that Paul George is going to play this full regular season and then play, a long playoff run, then say, hey, I'm going to do the Olympics too. I'm not confident that LeBron James is going to do that. I'm not confident that Steph Curry is going to do that. But I am confident that Desmond Bane, after this season ends, will say, I want to play for Team USA.
And I'm also confident that LeBron James is going to be like 100 years old when this season ends. And I struggle. It's easy to talk in January about how excited you are to play in the Olympics. Like you said, it's another thing to actually put it forward. I'm a big believer in Desmond Bane. What say you in the comments? Do you think Desmond Bane? I think he's a lock. Damichael Cole, put it maybe 70%, 60%. Is that fair?
I'd say about 65%. Okay, more so, he's a little bit down the pecking order, but the guys above him, there's no way that all of those guys play for Team USA.
I am at 100%. I wish I had Brevin Knight nearby from our trial of Taylor Jenkins episode. I would slam it 100%. I'm standing on the table for Desmond Bane. Give me a call, Grant Hill. I'm happy to have the conversation with you. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we'll continue the conversation around Jaren Jackson Jr., another Grizzlies player, conspicuous by his absence on the list, and Ja Morant. We'll talk about that next. Looking forward to discussing it with my good buddy Damichael Cole here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Hungryroot. Big fan of Hungryroot, and you should be as well. If you're trying to get a little healthier in 2024, Hungryroot is here to rescue you from short-lived resolutions by making meal planning easy and nutritious. Hungryroot is the easiest way to get fresh, high-quality food delivered to your door. Healthy groceries, simple recipes, all in one place. They go beyond the weekly grocery haul with thousands of easy recipes that actually put your groceries to good use before they get forgotten in the back of your fridge. The best part of Hungryroot is it follows a simple standard. It's got to taste good, be quick to make, and contain whole, trusted ingredients. Right now, Hungryroot is offering Locked On NBA listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedon to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. Don't forget to use our link so they know that we at Locked On Grizzlies sent you. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your car alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whatever your speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. 122 million parts plus for your number one whip. You will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride each and every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your car alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to United States customers. Damichael, I mentioned it a moment ago, conspicuous by his absence, Ja Morant from this list. We'll start with that before we get back to guys actually on it, because this part of the conversation is going to be pretty light, right? This is kind of speculative, Grant Hill plays it pretty close to the vest in terms of how he builds these rosters and player pools. No Ja Morant. We know Ja's coming off of the torn labrum. It's hard to imagine a world where Ja wouldn't be in this player pool if he was healthy.
He is the perfect USA player. Like
exactly what you were just talking about, a weakness of the team. Ja Morant, ask Herb, right over in New Orleans. He knows all about what Ja Morant can do off the dribble.
The playmaking, the athleticism, the two biggest weaknesses historically in the last 8 or so years of Team USA, the playmaking, the athleticism. Those are two things that are usually the things that separate Team USA, specifically the athleticism. But having that dynamic point guard, they're kind of lacking that guy right now. They have a lot of skill guys, Damian Lillard, Trae Young, Tyrese Halliburton, all in the pool. But Ja is just different. But Joe, here's the thing in terms of Ja being included in this pool to me. I think last summer it was very clear, self-explanatory when we were discussing, the FIBA World Cup and why Ja Morant wasn't included. Because at that time, Ja Morant was a healthy player. This year it's a little bit different. You got the torn labor injury, the surgery. I'm not sure if that played any role in this conversation or whatnot. But what would you have done, Joe? Because I think it's like this. I think in Ja's case, the Grizzlies, I talked to the doctor who told me that Grizzlies haven't issued a timeline themselves. So that's why I said I talked to a separate doctor about this who specializes in these things and basically said 6 months. Somewhere in the June-July range is when Ja should be back 100% full basketball activity. July is typically June is typically when Team USA July, because it'd be after the NBA Finals, is when the team would go into camp. And you're talking right after Ja is quote unquote 100% clear, or right around the time he is getting cleared. So maybe the Grizzlies factored into this conversation a little bit with their franchise player and whatnot. But maybe Team USA stayed away from Ja. Again, talking to Grant Hill last summer, he really he kind of deflected it. He mentioned, how the team was excited to have Jaren Jackson Jr. I know Desmond Bane talked to me how Grant Hill just constantly reached out to him 4 or 5 times last year during the process, but we never heard anything about Team USA and Ja Morant.
I think that this year it's pretty clear cut. He's a guy coming off of a serious injury that's requiring half of a year's recovery. Yeah, makes sense that because again, to your point, he'd need time to ramp up. You've got Tyrese Halliburton. You've got, I think, De'Aaron Fox was in the player pool. We mentioned Steph Curry. And
I don't think he's going to play. I don't know if you've seen his comments in the past.
Correct. But you understand my point. They have other options that have functioning shoulders, right? Yeah. So I think it's more clear-cut with Ja. I'm not as worried about that. I am curious as to your thoughts here, Damichael, on somebody, the one guy that we haven't talked about yet who has played international basketball, Jaren Jackson Jr. He is in an interesting place because now that Joel Embiid has declared that he's going to play for Team USA, you got Bam Adebayo in that mix, obviously, and other types of actual centers. You put Jaren at the 4, and I think you see the full extent of his powers defensively at the international level, plus the growth he's made offensively. Another hot take. I know it's 2 guys that are stars on a bad basketball team right now. Yeah. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. should be on this roster, but maybe his path is a little more cloudy than Bane's because of the reality that is Embiid entering the chat.
I think we're closer to the same page on the Jaren Jackson Jr. conversation. Number one, I have to emphasize this because this is what the people around the Team USA basketball program talk about. That familiarity matters to them because the one difference between Team USA and the rest of the countries is all these other countries, you're talking about Ricky Rubio and Santi Aldama are linked because of the factory that is Spain and the connectivity through that basketball program. Whereas Team USA, it's 12 guys this year. It's a whole different 12 guys, maybe 8, 9 different guys the next year. So it's a little bit different. But let's get into this Jaren Jackson Jr. conversation. You brought up a great point about saying he could play alongside those guys. Because on first thought, this is what I thought, Joe. I was very dismissive of that idea because the wing position is, in my opinion, the most loaded position in the NBA right now. So you're telling me, basically, if you put him at the 4, you're taking LeBron James, Kevin Durant, or Jason Tatum off the floor. And my first thought is there is no way in the world that I'm doing that in international competition. Remember, Jaren Jackson Jr. started at center last year, averaged 8 points per game, struggled rebounding and whatnot. That was kind of a big, you remember we were having that talk about the rebounding woes against Vucevic and Valanciunas and whatnot in international play. But if you put him at the 4, you get that 3. No, there's no 3 in the key. I think it's very matchup dependent. When Team USA plays those countries, let's say Spain, for example, they can throw the Herman Gomez brothers out there, 2 big body guys. Then you throw a Jaren Jackson in there. So basically, I think his role could be as a specialty type player. I don't expect him to start like he did on this because
I agree with that.
Yeah, to be more straightforward, I think Joel Embiid is ahead of him. Of course.
Oh, absolutely. That's obvious.
Yeah, Bam Adebayo, because
you're probably right, but it's not as obvious.
The rebound,
at least in my opinion,
rebounding and rim protection. You don't need
especially if we're going to start 52-year-old LeBron James at the 4, Damichael. Good Lord,
he might be 52, but he plays like he's half of it.
Half of 52 is what, 26?
Yeah. Hey, watch
that's
what you
crazy.
say,
That's how. I don't want any Laker LeBron fans yelling at me in the comments. I get enough of that already.
But the point is, I think his role would be more defined. Whereas last season, I think he thought he was going to play one way in international play, and the next thing you know, he's the starting center,
right?
And he's kind of used a little bit differently than he was with the Grizzlies. So I think he could thrive in that role, and I think his chances are about as similar to Bane's. I think both are. I would put both in that 60-65% range. Maybe Jaren a little bit higher, simply because of the fact, one, now you have more centers, Joel Embiid, Bam Adebayo, who could factor into the conversation, which moves him over to his more natural position. And you can play him in a specialty role when you play those bigger teams, because that's where USA is at a disadvantage sometimes too, against the Serbias of the world, the Lithuanians that can throw those 2 bigs at you. You can counter that and have Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor.
That would be pretty important. So to recap, Ja Morant at 0%. He's not in the player pool. Desmond Bane, you're at about 60 to 65%. Roughly the same for Jaren Jackson Jr. I agree with you on Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm putting it at 60 to 65%.
Okay.
For Desmond Bane, should be 100%.
100.
I'm standing on that table. I am marching down to Team USA headquarters in Colorado Springs, and I'm saying Desmond Bane should be on the 12-man roster. Get it done, Grant Hill, or else I'm going to sell my
He loves him some Desmond Bane, though.
33 jersey that I had in the mid-90s when I was a kid. We're going to preview Grizzlies Heat next, talking scary Terry trade, questionable for the game against Memphis. We'll talk about that and more coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. First, I want to remind you to check out Locked On Sports Today, first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. You can go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Big fan of FanDuel here at Locked On Grizzlies. The conference championships are approaching for the NFL. The big game is just a couple of weeks away. The NFL season's wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. You heard me right. $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. You can use live same-game parlays, finding bets in a new Explore tab, making a parlay in the Parlay Hub, all on an app that's extremely easy to use and extremely flexible in terms of the way that you can use it. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup, whether you're focused on the NBA or Conference Championship Sunday. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will close out this episode of Locked On Grizzlies talking Grizzlies Heat. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I've been covering the Grizzlies here, there, and everywhere for the last decade plus. You've come to the right place. Maybe you're regretting that after hearing me yell about Desmond Bane, but I can assure you, you're in a good spot for Memphis Grizzlies and NBA coverage. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. We're getting so close to 3,000 subscribers. Thanks to everybody that's already there. That's an everydayer checking us out every time an episode drops. Hopefully you'll join that crew today if you haven't already done so. Damichael, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we've been talking Team USA. I got fired up about Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, not as much. Going into tonight's game for the Memphis Grizzlies, right? Because that team's still playing, the team that we cover. The Grizzlies are still playing basketball games. They're on their East Coast, Eastern Conference kind of road trip right now.
Yeah.
They take on a Miami Heat team that recently made an acquisition that changes the game for them a little bit, at least in terms of guard scoring. No disrespect to Kyle Lowry, but I think you're going to tell us how Terry Rozier, even if he doesn't play in this particular game, questionable for this contest, he's going to make the Heat a lot more scary moving forward.
Yeah, they call him Scary Terry, right? And he kind of earned that name when he was playing with the Boston Celtics. You remember they beat the Milwaukee Bucks, and he pulls up to the arena in the Drew Bledsoe jersey to troll Eric Bledsoe, and he kind of went at Bledsoe, and Bledsoe was starting point guard for the Bucks back in the day. But here's the thing about Terry Rozier. For one, I think if you look at the Miami Heat right now, the way that this team is wired, they're in that middle of the pack type stretch right now. They're very top heavy. Matter of fact, this is a very un-Heat type of stat, but it's a current NBA type stat. The Heat have 3 guys on the team that are averaging, well, pre-Terry Rozier. Now they have 4, but throughout this season, they have 3 guys averaging over 20 points per game. Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler. This is the first time in Miami Heat history that's ever been the case. Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh never did that, nor did any other big 3 in history. But again, outside of Wame Jaquez and maybe Caleb Martin giving you 10 points, they don't have a lot of other guys who consistently give you scoring. Duncan Robinson has had a decent year as he's worked his way back into the rotation this year. A sharp 3-point shooter, we know what he's capable of. But here's the thing about Terry Rozier. And he gives them something different from the standpoint of a shot-creating shot maker. Joe, I'm going to throw this at you because this kind of sums up where Terry Rozier is at this point. Because before I say this, I want to kind of address the notions on who he is as a player at this point. If you ask it depends on which Charlotte Hornets fan or person you talk to, you get 2 different answers. You get the great shot maker. He is one of the most difficult shot takers and makers in the NBA right now, makes a lot of 3-point shots. I think he's top 5 in Charlotte Hornets history in 3-point made. But you also have that side that says, oh, he ball hogs. He took a lot of, the playmaking away from LaMelo Ball. You bring in LaMelo Ball as your draft pick, and he has to share his playmaking duties with Terry Rozier. And some people feel like that's stunning his growth a little bit. But here's what I wanted to point out to you. Let's look at some stats real quick. Shout out to our friends over at StatMuse for really making this.
Shout out to StatMuse. Yeah.
Shout out to StatMuse. So Damian Lillard's stats this season. Check this out. 25 points. Terry Rozier, 24 points. Damian Lillard's assists, 6.8 assists per game. Terry Rozier, 6.7 assists per game. Damian Lillard's 3-pointers made per game, 3. Terry Rozier's 3-pointers made per game, 3. Damian Lillard's field goal percentage, 42.7%. Terry Rozier, 46.1%. Damian Lillard's 3-points percentage, 35.2%. Terry Rozier, 38.3%. So I think there you have it. I mean, it looks kind of, the whole empty stat thing when you talk about him playing for Charlotte and LaMelo Ball being injured for a large part of the season. And that's kind of when he had an uptick in his numbers. But at the same time, I think, look, watching Desmond Bane play this year has kind of made me very dismissive of the empty stats type talk, especially for guys who are doing their work efficiently. And as I just kind of laid it out to you, Terry Rozier has done his work efficiently this season. So he gives them another shot maker. Really interested to see if he's going to play. I believe Miami Heat are listing him as questionable right now. But this is going to be a tough task for the Grizzlies because now you're talking about a team who currently has 4 guys who average over 20 points per game. Of course, that's impossible to keep up over the full course of a season. But that's what they have at their disposal. So it will be interesting to see how the Grizzlies' strong defense, because they still have a strong defense, is able to handle that offensive firepower, Joe.
Well, as you alluded to, obviously an average, maybe a couple guys score 25 and then you score 18 one night, and then you score 22 the next, and you're still up around that 20, and you kind of pointed that out. I think that the thing that I'm most interested in, whether Rozier plays or not, is you talked about on the last episode, Damichael, and if you haven't listened to it after you listen to this, go check it out. I thought Damichael did a great job. You talked about the identity that this version of this team is creating, right? And you saw it in Toronto. It's important to point out that Toronto and the Grizzlies are both kind of like in that 6th or 7th worst team in the NBA range. So it's kind of the blind leading the blind in a way. Not meant to be disrespectful, just kind of a turn of phrase. I do think that going against a team like the Heat, who are very capable, we've seen them do it time and again, kind of sleepwalking through the regular season, then the playoffs show up and they make a run as the 7 or 8 seed at the NBA Finals. I do wonder how this version of the Grizzlies compete. Because, again, I said the Grizzlies would lose to Toronto. Memphis won. Hooray. That's great. I don't think anybody's going to pick them to beat the Heat. If the Grizzlies are going to knock off Miami in Miami, they are going to have to find a way to continue to build upon this new version of themselves that they've established. They have to continue to ride the hot hand of Jaren Jackson Jr. offensively. They have to keep Vince Williams Jr. in the mix. Luke Kennard, the point guard, the playmaker, which I was so excited to see.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jaren's continued growth. Yeah, I mean, he did it in Detroit. I didn't see why he couldn't do it in Memphis, and he showed against the Raptors that he still has that capacity. That needs to continue to be something they prioritize, and beyond Jaren, it has to be unselfish basketball because there's nobody else that has that level of skill on this Grizzlies offense. Luke Kennard is very specific in what he can do. Nobody outside of Jaren has that creation for himself as well as for others at times that Jaren does. The rest of the group has to do it by committee or else the Heat are going to run them off the court.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember from that last matchup, but we talked a lot before that game, Bam versus Jaren.
Right.
And it lived up to the hype.
It was good. Yeah, you can tell they like playing against each other.
Jaren won the matchup for about 3 quarters. Like Jaren was cooking them a little bit, and Bam, late in the game, like Miami ended up winning, and Bam had a strong fourth quarter in that game. So I'm interested to see how that plays out too, because here's the thing, the Grizzlies will probably start Jaren at the 4. Santi is out, so then they can't go back to that starting lineup. Santi will be out for this game, and we'll see about his status going forward. But Xavier Tillman probably rejoins the starting lineup. And I would expect the Heat probably to throw their small ball 4 on Tillman and Bam Adebayo versus Jaren Jackson Jr. I mean, it's a match. I mean, that matchup is super physical. We know Bam is one of the more physical centers in the NBA, and Jaren has just straight been playing bully ball this year. I mean, moving guys out of the way. It's kind of that forcefulness that a lot of Grizzlies fans have been asking him to play with for years. You're starting to consistently see it from him. That matchup usually tells the tale of how this game plays out. That definitely was the case the last time these two teams met.
Jaren versus Bam, winner gets the Team USA spot.
There it is.
Put it on the table, you coward, Bam Adebayo. Boom. I'm doing it for Jaren Jackson Jr. just like I did it for Desmond Bane. I'll walk down to Miami after I walk to Colorado Springs, and I'll say, let's get it done. Jaren versus Bam. Pay-per-view, quality matchup there. It's going to be fun.
Fight, yeah.
I look forward to watching the game. Hopefully you do as well. Again, plenty to still watch this team for, even in a season that's kind of gone sideways like this one has for the Grizzlies. Thank you guys so much for checking out Locked On Grizzlies. Remember to check out Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 national sports streaming channel on YouTube, covering the top stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. The next time that we are on Locked On Grizzlies, we'll be talking Grizzlies Heat, how the game went, who played well, who didn't play as well. We'll take a look at the trade scope and the realm that the Grizzlies might be residing in. Maybe check out the Western Conference, the lottery standings, where the Grizzlies currently fit. Kind of take a lay of the land heading in to a weekend for Memphis that, again, they're out of the playoff picture. At least most logical people argue they're out of the playoff picture, but that doesn't mean there aren't things to keep an eye on when it comes to this Grizzlies team. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. Help us get past that 3,000 subscriber threshold on YouTube. Damichael appreciates it, as do I. Thank you so much for being here with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Until next time, he's Damichael. I'm Joe. Stay locked in wherever you get podcasts on YouTube, all of the above. We'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies.